Welcome, listeners, to this special series from Advanced TV History. It's a collaborative effort with The Real Women and its fearless leader, Ashley Pacini.
The Real Women is a networking platform that celebrates the successes of women in filmed entertainment. Each week, we profile a different woman who we can support. There are plenty of women ready and willing to take that next step in their careers, and we're here to help them get there.
You know, frankly, Advanced TV History is all about supporting women in entertainment, as well as bringing you the stories of these women that help you in your everyday life. Now, of late, we at Advanced TV History have focused our position and our voice on connecting the dots of TV and feminism to politics and culture, because that is something we all have in common. It's just that many of us also have that perspective, watching TV and having an even more powerful experience. Listeners, this all happens behind the camera as well as in front of it, the stories that are being told.
We hope you enjoyed this chat with one of our real women.
I'd like to introduce Danielle Earle. Welcome, Danielle, to Advanced TV History and Real Women.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys. Thank you, Cynthia and Ashley, for inviting me to this program. I'm so excited to be here.
It is our pleasure. We are going to ask you some easy questions and then maybe ask you some tougher questions, but really want you to be able to share with our audience some of where you see opportunity going, some of the opportunity that you've had and how you've gotten them, how you as a woman of color see all of industry and the power of media differently. It definitely is an experience that we have become more aware of with the summer of COVID and with the summer of George Floyd, and that legacy that we have as white people, Ashley and I, to recognize our position, our power, our privilege, and to do whatever we can to share the microphone, I guess, to be specific. Ashley, anything more for you to add on that?
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here too and to speak with Danielle. You know, Real Women is more of an online social media platform. Most interactions I have with women are via email or Twitter messages or Instagram DMs. And so being able to have a woman on where I can hear her voice and interact with her like this is super exciting for me. And I know will be super exciting for our followers as well. So I'm really excited to participate as well and to actually hear your voice, Danielle. Actually, I've heard your voice because you're online, you've done other interviews, but to be able to interact with you is really exciting. So thank you, Cynthia, for this platform for me to hear voices such as Danielle. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you guys. I'm excited too. Thank you so much for that.
And we are nothing if not all painfully polite, because it's just the chance to speak with people when otherwise it's the cat and the husband. So,
it's
all
true.
Right. So Danielle, you are no stranger to the Real Women crowd, and you are no stranger to this industry. So what we'd like to understand from you is a little bit more about, that childhood sense of, I want to do TV. I like TV. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, filmmaking kind of came later in college, probably my senior year at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. So that's where I went to college for animation, visual effects. But when I was younger, I was into animation. So, I loved, cartoons. I loved, Charles Schultz. But yeah, and I just I fell in love with it. But when I was in, college, that's when I started kind of thinking about film from a professor. He was telling me, it's Danielle, you seem to know a lot about movies and films. You should really go into this. But I was just, afraid. I was kind of, scared and nervous because, I didn't really see anybody like me, making it. And there was a lot of, just in general, female directors out there that were visible and making their own projects. So, but just by that, for him telling me that, that's when I went to school I finished at the Academy of Art University. And then I took a couple of classes at City College of New York for my master's. And then I started my own web series documentary called On the Scene. And it was kind of I don't know, a hippie type of person during that time. It was rock, indie movement that was happening in Brooklyn and, in New York. And I used to go to different bands and just interview them. And a lot of them became pretty successful, Ian Axel, Great Big World. And during that time, there were just college students like me So I branched off from there, then did Brooklyn is in Love, the web series. Writers Guild of America East reached out to me online, just on Facebook, and were like, we saw your web series. I'm representative for the Writers Guild. Can you come to the office in New York? And I'm like, I never knew anything about the union. At that time, I was just like a young filmmaker in New York, and I joined immediately, and that's kind of how it started during that time.
Talk a little bit more about that moment you were recognized and you made the decision to join the Writers Guild. What does that mean?
At that time when I was young, I didn't really know about it until I started going to the meetings, and you're sitting at a table with people that worked at all the different shows that you grew up watching on television, which is kind of like nerve-wracking. And even one of my friends, Scott Sickles, he writes for a series of soap opera, General Hospital. This is a show. Even, all these different, writers that watch the Law and Order SVU and everything. So I kind of became friends with them, and they're kind of seeing me as this young filmmaker, just like coming into this office. Fast forward how many years later, it's like been 10 years. I've been just kind of staying on that path and doing writing and producing since then. But it really just kind of gave me a sense of a community and just learning from others and just, networking.
I'm assuming you had to apply to the Writers Guild. What was the process like for those women that are listening that are looking to join it? What advice would you have?
It was, it took me a while because they reached out to me like one time. Then I had another meeting with the same representative because they really wanted me to sign. But it was kind of weird for me because it was during the time when they had the writers' strike going on for the Writers Guild, and a lot of people started making content on the web. So that was like during like 2000, I would say 2007, 2008, around that time. So I used to go to these meetings, and I flew out to California try to learn about how to market, my web series. But I guess to me, I feel like you just have to try your best to make a project or any type of projects that's kind of like original or just shows some sort of being authentic, in the content that you're putting out there, I think. For that, right now it's a little bit different. It's a lot harder to get into the Writers Guild now because you have to work for a TV network. You have to have a certain amount of credits to join. So when I was, with me, I feel like sometimes I look back, I'm like, I was kind of a little bit lucky because I was just making my own films. I didn't expect people to actually watch it, but they were watching it on YouTube. So my advice would be just, continue making content. And you never know, like it might be somebody just sees it and gets, picked up, like similar to like Broad City. They were making their own little, web series. They end up getting a project on Comedy Central. So, for anybody, there's always hope.
Thank you. Do you find that, when you got into it, you took advantage of YouTube? Are there current platforms that you feel women or creators in general could start utilizing that either might be up and coming or just don't have as many creators as they could, like YouTube did at the beginning?
Yeah, I would say, YouTube's a good platform. I would say Vimeo is a really great, source too. It's really kind of competing with YouTube, and they even have content in terms of like if you want to have a web series to rent so people can be able to make a profit from it. But it seems like all the streaming services are really giving a great platform for filmmakers. Even Amazon Prime is doing a great job. A lot of friends of mine I know that have series on there, and they're able to make a profit. So
that was an amazing list of resources. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to your experience in animation and how it impacted you moving over into live action. Did you feel like there were skill sets that you learned as an animator that you were able to bring over? Also, do you feel that animation is such a unique visual? Are you able to kind of take advantage of the experimentation that you can do with animation? Are you able to kind of pull that concept into your filmmaking?
Yeah, that's a good question. And once you asked that question, it brought me back because especially with the web series coming from the animation world, I did storyboards in the beginning for that web series, and not till lately. Like for the film I did for Lover's Game, I didn't really do that much of storyboards, but I think it did kind of help me a little bit in a way of been trying to be kind of like a visionary and just thinking about things and your imagination. And then as an animator, you kind of have to have that background. But
now you do identify as a producer, writer, and a director. Do you tend to lean towards one over the other, or do you enjoy all three? And if you do, what is it about each role that you enjoy?
If you had asked me that maybe like 10 years ago, which one, I would have probably said like a director, writer, that type of element, especially with working with actors and getting everything together. But through time, I'm like, now I'm kind of looking towards or leaning towards producing now and just helping with other filmmakers get their projects going. And because I kind of look back because I didn't really have that type of, support doing that. Like my first feature film, it was kind of like all me and, and getting funds and doing fundraisers and all that type of stuff. And even live events in New York. I used to do live events to get, money for my films. Now I'm more leaning towards producing to kind of help the younger generation and, finding resources. And so that way they have that type of support.
I think it's amazing that you're able to help, with the next generation of filmmakers, and you do teach at a high school in New Jersey. And what is it about the students that you teach and about them becoming filmmakers that excites you? Like, what kind of vision do you see that they have, and what kind of stories are they sharing?
Coming from the city and coming from New York, and I lived in Oakland, New Jersey, I didn't have the background in high school. Like, there was not POC people in general, growing up in that area. So going to New York, but I still had that family in New York and that type of background. I kind of feel like a relation, to the kids that I'm teaching at the school, at the Orange High School, and just seeing how they're like me teaching and seeing that they see a teacher that's in that same POC, umbrella, helping them make films, and seeing seeing me making my own films, it kind of gives them an idea of like, wow, if she can be able to do it, I can be able to do it too. And kind of having that type of support and safe space environment that I try my best to help with the kids. But seeing their films, one of my students, she was a senior. In the beginning, she was very hard, in the classroom. She's like, I don't want to do any work or anything. But through time, she ended up getting accepted to Montclair University in film. And during her senior year, got accepted to the Bergen County Film Festival. So her mom wasn't able to make it. I drove her to the film festival, and she was so excited. It was like her first opportunity to have her movie that she worked hard in class on the big screen. And just seeing them come back after they graduate, and you're still there at the school, and they're like, Ms. Earl, thank you for like all the encouragement that you've given me. It really does motivate you and just touches your heart so much as a teacher. Seeing their stories, like they're talking about their lives of what they've experienced, whether it's like relationships or family. And these are the next generation that's really kind of, I look at them like I never would have thought in a million years to write about this as a kid. So yeah, I'm just really blown away by the work.
It's amazing. And do you find that there are still things that could be beneficial for them that's missing? And like, what do you hope that they can have access to that you weren't able to, that you're still trying to get for them?
When I look back at when I was like in high school, I don't think there was a lot of resources back then. I think now is a good time because there are resources in terms of like Vimeo and all these different media outlets that they can actually do while they're in high school and sign up for and make their own films. Back then, we didn't really have in terms of like video quality, in terms of like, thinking of making a film in high school. So having this program in Orange, New Jersey is a great thing. And I wish that there's more programs like that for the high school level and for kids. I'm just hoping that a lot of companies do open a lot more doors for them as like in terms of internships, which I'm trying my best to do as a teacher, trying to use the resources and the connections that I have and getting the mentors so that way once they graduate, they're all set and they have a support system.
And I just was re-listening to our conversation with Margaret Cho that Ashley and I had a couple days ago. We were talking a little bit about disruptors and the notion that technology is disrupting so many of our different processes. That which we thought was too big to fail, all of a sudden now is struggling because technology or the blended generations of the millennials and Gen Z, it's changing so fast. So my question to you is, who now work, elbow to elbow with these students, do you see some qualities or some values that they have that you would coin as a disruptor or could be disruptive in a positive way? It's a major change influencer that the industry has no idea is about to come.
That's a good question. We always talk about all the time about cell phones, or like, you shouldn't have any cell phones in the classroom. I was just talking to somebody the other day, no, actually you have to have them use their cell phones in a light, because in terms of marketing, if they want to take photos, behind the scene photos, or they're promoting themselves, a lot of employers now, pretty much everything is based on, if you have like a website, well, not even websites are as, a long time ago used to be very popular, but now it's all on Instagram. Facebook is kind of not even as popular as I thought. When I tell my kids I'm on Facebook, they're like, my grandma's on Facebook. And even Instagram, like I'm even learning myself with that type of thing. They're teaching me a lot of different things. Some of the kids in the classroom have like 10,000 followers on Instagram. They're in high school, So I think they can definitely teach, I think, a lot of the older generation.
Yeah, I would think that just the concept that they have thousands of followers on Instagram is a sense of power and influence that we can't even grasp, and that they are too young to grasp. Another point that Margaret was making from 25 years ago is, here she was, the star of the series, and she didn't even understand the power that she had. She was not trained to advocate for herself or to use that voice. So you're working so closely with these young people. I hope you're able to bring them along to recognize that with power or with influence comes a certain amount of responsibility, but that responsibility also then is to yourself and your future self.
What's so cool, Danielle, about what you're doing is when I was in high school, there was no media classes. I knew movies and TV shows were made. I had no idea that like you could get paid for it and that it was an industry. And so I didn't even know until I was in college that my college even had a filmmaking program and a storytelling program. You having the ability to teach these kids at such a young age in high school and helping them form their futures at such a young age, I think is phenomenal. Going back to kind of yourself as a filmmaker and a storyteller, you've started your own production company, PLEntertainment. What's the story behind that? And also, what's the process in starting a production company?
I started the production company, it was in 2010. So it was, I was actually at City College of New York still at that time. And I just, in my mindset, I was just kind of leading towards that whole filmmaking path. And I think with me joining the Writers Guild, that could have had an influence on it, with me, trying to form my own company and try to be more like established at that time. I went online, I did research. I even went to my local bank and told them that I'm starting this production company. They're kind of like looking at me like, this 20-something is starting her own film production, because there's like none out in Oakland, New Jersey at that time. Yeah, and I just kind of started it in that way, and it was pretty much me, like a sole entity in the company, working on it on my own. And then eventually, through time, with the films that I was producing, I ended up getting hired for other projects as a producer, like paid projects. And so that kind of, it grew through, that time, and just getting more collaborative productions on board on that. But it did take a long time in terms of that. I wasn't even thinking about like the whole future of it and where I would be right now. So yeah, so I would say like that would kind of be the process of starting your own production company, just kind of doing a lot of research, making sure, budgeting and just seeing if you're in that right step, in that right position to do that.
It's a lot of work, and it has financial responsibility to it. So you want to make sure that when you're doing it, you understand what you're getting yourself into. But with your production company, do you tend to go looking for projects that you can either option or take on that somebody else has created, or do you do the production company for yourself and for the things that you've created?
It's I would say a little bit of both. Usually it happens with like other people that reached out to me. I even did a music video, just somebody reaching out randomly from a mutual friend, and we need a director, hire for a paid position for this music video. Would you be able to do it? And I'm like, okay. I just did a interview and reached out. So it kind of happens that way. I do actually reach out to different projects. I would say the New York Women Filmmakers Group has been an amazing source. I mean, I remember when it kind of just started and they only had, a certain amount of people in that group. But since then, it kind of blossomed, and there's been other Facebook groups that have been great. There's another one called It's Who You Know, like POC and Media. That's on Facebook, that a lot of different like industry people that work for like BET, everything like in terms of the POC that work there, and they post jobs that before they even have it listed on the website, you're able to get an opportunity to be able to get jobs, like paid work. Yeah, somebody even reached out to me being an AD for a film that was with Swiss Beats and called The Love Tale. And I was, hired for a couple of days just from that group of just, collaboration and saying, oh, this person's, has a production company. She does as a director, producer. You'll reach out to her. Maybe she's available. And that's kind of how you're able to get opportunities like that. But I would say a little bit of both. Definitely don't be afraid to reach out. Definitely don't be afraid to apply for different projects and whichever level it is, because even the one I just described working with, Swiss Beats, it might be a smaller level, but the people that you work with, you never know what's the next opportunity that happens, and they'll remember you, through that. So
that's really helpful. Thank you. When it comes to the women we profile on Real Women, we can only really take a certain amount of words for the platform. We don't really have the luxury of going in depth on some of the questions that we ask. And I had asked you a question. Your response was the following, and you're a great storyteller because you had a great hook that has stayed with me since I read your profile. And I've been wanting to ask you this. So thanks to Cynthia, we have a platform where I can ask you this. You said, over the years, I grew to be a big fan of Shonda Rhimes, but that's another story for another day. I would love to hear what that story is, because it's now another day. And what does Shonda Rhimes mean to you?
Oh my God, thank you so much for that. I was with a Jersey accent, kind of just doing another day. Series that she, created I was in college at that time. It was a new thing because nobody really knew, the first season that she put out for Grey's Anatomy, nobody knew who Shonda Rhimes was, say, for the first season. And it was such a great series because it had so much diversity, showing the race with an Asian American and a Black, doctor, both of them working in the same field. That never happened, that type of storyline before. And I think that was so unique and just wonderful. And even with just other areas that how it just really pushed, for diversity over the years. And even how she was able to have a series for that much length of time. I think it's been on for 15 years or probably more. And how she was able to get multiple shows on that, for ABC. I even talked to my kids about it. I kind of grew to love her work. Shonda Rhimes was kind of like my Wonder Woman in college because of how she was able to tackle all these different things, and just being a person of color, a woman producer running all these shows, it's something to look up to. And I noticed even through time with my program, a lot more women, a lot more girls are signing up for the filmmaking classes and digital media because, I don't know, maybe because they see me doing it and they're like, oh wow, she could be able to do it. I want to be a filmmaker too. And talking to their parents. I even talked to a parent the other day, and she was like, oh my gosh, Miss Earl, my daughter's now looking up camera equipment. So I'm gonna have to save money to buy her a camera because all these different things. So, and I'm just blown away because sometimes I look at myself and I'm like, are my kids, all the information I'm giving them, is it catching on? But it seems like it is when they're at their homes and talking it over with their families. And the class that I have at the school, it's literally like a second home to them in a way, or pretty much their home, where it's like a safe space and they feel the most comfortable. Definitely want to continue on that.
Actually, I'd like to just piggyback on that because, oh gosh, 3 or 4 years ago, I did a podcast episode on, not so much on Shonda and her career, but rather the book that she wrote, A Year of Yes, and how that really presented the framework of her career growth, how she transitioned her life from one that was sort of okay with being in the shadows and the self-talk and the expectations she had of herself, and how people in her life influenced her to believe in her talents and her capacity. It's a great book. I absolutely recommend it. This many years later, Shonda Rhimes, A Year of Yes. And Danielle, it just sure sounds as though there are some real parallels to that. And so it makes all the sense in the world that you would find her to be an inspiration.
Wow, thank you so much. That's so funny that you mentioned about it because, with the Year of Yes, I actually, my quote, for my email is saying yes is courage, saying yes is the sun, saying yes is life, related to Shonda Rhimes. So thank you so much for bringing that up. That's great.
So Danielle, with that, saying yes and looking forward to the future of your career, what is next for you?
With everything with the pandemic, COVID, I did have projects scheduled for the summer. So everything is pushed to next year. I would say now it's kind of I want to kind of branch off with my company and helping doing more for the kids that are graduating in the program. In terms of like how the program is in the high school, it's great, but I love to take it to the next level and hiring them to become like in terms of internships. And so I've done that a lot. In a lot of the productions that I've been hired for, I would always, first recommend to the producer, like, do you guys need any, interns, that can help out on set? I have students, and a lot of times, pretty much 9 out of 10 times they hire them, and they're able to add all that experience to the resume. So really want to do more of that in kind of connecting to film production companies and doing that as a form of PLEntertainment, and helping them and doing workshops for that company. That's kind of like a goal that I have right now for the upcoming year.
That's amazing. I live in Los Angeles. I moved there specifically for the industry. And when I was in film school, it was always, you got to move to LA or New York. And it sounds like you're almost creating this storytelling central where you're at, and being able and, wanting to take your production company to the next level and hiring these students. And what a great opportunity, creating a TV film hub where you're at. Do you ever feel that pressure to have to move to one of the big cities to be a part of things? Or do you feel that storytelling can happen anywhere and you're just going to push that forward with your students?
Exactly what you mentioned. Even for writers, like the Writers Guild will have meetings, and people will say the exact same line and say, it's either New York or LA. If you're like a screenwriter, you're going to have to move to LA, because in New York, it's like hard to get jobs or to pitch your ideas. And there's like a small pool of opportunities, I guess, in a way. I think with what's happening now in terms of this whole pandemic, and everything is kind of changing, I think that a lot more opportunities are happening now, I think, rather than before. But I think like where I am in terms of New Jersey, it is coming, it's changing a lot in terms of like productions coming out here. I mean, even like the Joker, films in was in Newark, New Jersey. And so a lot of companies are like feeling better to come film out here than, versus New York. It's good to be at least close to the city, and to be able to still have those connections and still be able to, produce content, with it. But I do feel, kind of pressured. A lot of good friends of mine moved out to California and they're doing like great things.
Right. And one of the reasons I started Real Women was for this exact reason, was to show that, you can tell a story anywhere. And we've profiled women from, of course, Los Angeles, New York, but also women in Australia, women in Poland, women in London. And I think there are stories everywhere, and there are people in those locations that are ready to help share those stories. And so I think what you're doing, again, is phenomenal. Your students have those stories to share, and providing them a way to share them, especially locally, I think is great. And it'll be impactful for everyone in the future.
Excellent. You are an encyclopedia with regard to that point in a career. Well, that point in a career where you don't even know that it's going to be your career. So, you're sharing this wisdom and realism with your students, as well as anybody listening here today who's kind of like, I think I want to use this time where everything is changing, and I'm going to go for it. And that it comes across in your voice so profoundly. If I can ask, because this is always a fun wrap-up question that we love to ask our guests here at Advanced TV Herstory. Thinking back on your own TV viewing, what is that one series that still stays with you, in which you saw yourself, or you just really thought was so incredibly well done?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. There's so many series or like shows. The only one I would think of, because it's pretty much was like a part of my whole adolescent, my younger days, was like the X-Files, because I liked Gillian Anderson, and I was like a really big sci-fi nerd in high school and during that time. But I would say like that series, because it lasted for so long, just the good creativity that they put towards it. But now in my older years, I would say My So-Called Life. Even though it's an oldie, but a goodie. And it's, only lasted for one season. And I actually like connected with one of the actors on Instagram. And I try to get him to be a guest on for the Writers Guild that played Ricky. But that's one, oh my God, I love that series. It just had so much heart. And, I wish that it kept going in terms of the writing and the characters. And it's, and even, despite, maybe, people might have mentioned, but to me, I felt it had a lot of diversity. It talked about a lot of tough issues and things like that, in high school. And people can still watch it today, and it's relatable. So
it is super relatable. And actually, we did a podcast episode on the Christmas episode in particular. And this was in the first year of this podcast. But that one it resonates. It's a really deep episode. And so I kind of get into it because it's one where those mother relationships, you just don't see those kinds of relationships depicted a whole lot, not with teens and their moms. And then the other aspect was that as I was working on this, and this is why I love the podcast, it kept me up like for many, many nights, or I would wake up early thinking about why the show really ended.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to kind of ask that listeners and Danielle go back in and listen to that episode, because without any knowledge and any access to anybody involved with the show, I think I kind of figured it out. And they all did a really good job of kind of not saying why it ended. And it's an important realization that culture and politics all go to advertising, and the advertisers do carry sway in network TV. So I'll leave you with that. I love that episode. My daughter loves that episode. And My So-Called Life, my gosh. And the X-Files. It doesn't get any better than that.
I know. You always thank you so much for that.
Danielle, let's wrap up by sharing with the group your social media handles, how they can get a hold of you, and PL Entertainment's URL.
On Instagram, it's DE227, and I'm also on Facebook, and you can check me out on the website www.PLEntertainment.com is the website. You can see all the films that we're working on. We have a feature film coming out, The Haunted Mind of Insomniac. It's coming out very soon, and so you can definitely check that out.
That's PLEntertainment.com, and listeners, this will also appear in the show notes as well. Danielle, it's been a tremendous, tremendous time getting to know you and experiencing your life as you connect with students, young people, and now the young people who have come through your classes and are now venturing out into the field. That has to be incredibly rewarding. And also they are maybe they're your secret weapons, because they are keeping you young and innovating in ways that you can't even appreciate.
So true. It's like, they're definitely keeping me going and exposing me to a lot in terms of TV and film. So
excellent. We now have a connection to the future. Danielle Earle, it's been a pleasure having you with us. Ashley, any final thoughts?
No, just thank you so much for sharing your stories and for being willing to be a voice for your community, and for reminding those of us that have the privilege of constantly sharing our voices that it's time for us to kind of step aside and to let you and other Black folks and other people of color, that it's time to hear their voices. So thank you for helping us to remember that.
Thank you so much, Ashley and Cynthia. You guys are my greatest advocate for that and for change. So I just want to say thank you so much for being just a great allies and creating this platform for everybody. So it's great.
Now there's some energy to carry with you for the rest of your day. In addition to Danielle Earle and Ashley Pacini, I must thank Catherine Yang for her work making three voices sound like we're practically all in the same room, instead of on the same Zoom. Music you hear is Jazzer's Take Me Higher, found at freemusicarchive.org. Links to all those groups Danielle mentioned are in the show notes. Linger over all our past episodes at the website tvherstory.com, and there you'll be able to sign up for the monthly e-newsletter. You can send us a note and find our social media handles. Folks, I just want to timestamp for a moment this midsummer of COVID episode with Danielle Earle, because Danielle is the first school teacher to be interviewed for Advanced TV Herstory, and she's heading into a fall of uncertainty. Well, we can only wish her the very best. So let's do that as she continues her work with young people. Thank you for listening, because you and they, those young people, are why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.